Good evening and a very warm welcome. Let's take a look at the top story that we are tracking for you this hour. The diversion of a European flight and arrest of a dissident by Belarus has stirred a major controversy at a global level. Western powers on the United Nations Security Council have called for a probe into Minsk's diversion of the European flight. Now, the United Nations Civil Aviation Agency, the ICAO, will hold an urgent meeting to discuss the incident. The United States and other members of the Security Council have denounced the move as an act of piracy and called it a blatant attack on international civilian aviation safety and European security. However, some diplomats say that the Security Council action is unlikely because veto power, Russia, can shield its ally Belarus. Now, Lukashenko continues to enjoy solid support from Russian President Vladimir Putin, who is expected to be hosting the Belarusian leader soon. Putin's spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, has said there was no reason to doubt Lukashenko's version of events. On Wednesday, Russia accused the West of demonstrating a united outburst of hysteria in its outrage response to the diversion of an airliner to Minsk.
I would like to underline that not even 3 days have passed since the incident. The investigation hasn't finished yet. Explanations of the aviation experts that are investigating the incident haven't been received, but our Western partners, all as one, swiftly, unanimously, and as always, unreasonably, drew their conclusions. Speculation began about non-existent Moscow's hand in this event. What we have heard on one hand is a united outburst of hysteria and on the other hand demonstrate an absolute lack of integrity in facts.
European leaders have agreed to cut air links with Belarus and told airlines to avoid the country's airspace. A Barcelona-bound flight from Minsk was refused access to French airspace, while Poland banned Belarusian flights from using its airspace. Governments in the West have told their airlines to reroute flights and have also announced plans to ban Belarusian planes. Germany has also threatened a spiral of sanctions against Belarus. The German foreign minister also said that without Russia's support, Lukashenko would have no future in Belarus.
What is clear is that we will not be satisfied with small sanction steps, but rather we want the sanctions to put significant pressure on Belarusian economic structures and financing so that the repercussions are felt and the Lukashenko regime is made to understand that the moment for dialogue has passed as long as things like those of the last week happen.
Taking on Russia for its unwavering support to Lukashenko, Lithuania's foreign minister said that Lukashenko and Putin plan to annex Belarus and that the annexation will not go well with Europe.
Actually, Lukashenko is playing with Putin and trying to and helping Putin to annex the country. So we should send the signals to Russia as well that annexation wouldn't go well with Europe.
Now, Estonia's permanent representative to the UN, Sven Jørgensen, has called it a blatant attack on international civilian aviation safety.
Enhance our efforts, including through the coordination of our sanctions policies, to ensure that the Belarusian authorities bear responsibility for their actions. We fully condemn this as yet another blatant attempt by the Belarusian authorities to silence all opposition voices. We continue to stand firmly with the people of Belarus in their quest for a democratic future and for respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms.
The commercial flight was on its way to Lithuania from Greece when it was diverted to arrest opposition journalist Roman Protasevich on board. A Belarusian fighter jet was scrambled to escort the plane. Lukashenko has accused the journalist of plotting a rebellion, but has not given out any details of the accusations. The detained journalist, Roman Protasevich, is now in a Minsk jail, along with his girlfriend. Now, our correspondent, Daria, is joining us live from Moscow. Daria, thanks for being with us on this broadcast. Let's start with the United Nations Civil Aviation Agency. They will be holding a meeting. Countries like the United States and other members of the UN Security Council have denounced this move by Lukashenko as an act of piracy. Let's talk about what this means for Belarus and the possible sanctions that they may be facing.
Well, in terms of possible sanctions, it is unclear whether there will be a full suspension of flights over the Belarusian airspace. As we know, Minsk has defended its decision to divert the plane. The Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko has claimed that his aviation institution has acted in line with the law and has been acting in interest of public safety and international safety protocols. Moscow has backed that position and also said that Minsk has acted reasonably and in line with the law. So at this point it is unclear whether the investigation that most countries involved have called and European nations have called for an independent and thorough investigation by the UN's aviation agency into the incident, whether that could bring fruit. It also involves lots of complicated legal issues, since it involves jurisdiction of 4 countries involved in this incident. We know that in addition to the 36 members of the UN's aviation body, also representatives from Greece, Belarus, Ireland rather, Lithuania and Poland are also invited to this urgent meeting that is being held by the UN Aviation Agency. We know that many larger European airlines have already started to avoid the Belarusian airspace and have rerouted their flights to avoid to fly around Belarus. We know that NATO has also urged for this investigation and backs this independent probe into the incident. The International Civil Aviation Organization has recommended caution for planes flying over Belarus. And earlier it has indicated that the diversion of the plane could be in contravention to the 1944 Chicago Convention, which regulates international air safety protocols. However, Minsk insists that it acted in accordance with the law and was protecting civilian population, despite as it turned out later, that this a threat of a potential bomb on board that plane that was force landed in Minsk turned out to be a hoax. We know that European countries are considering sanctioning Belarus over this action. The foreign ministers of the European Union are gathering in Lisbon today and are starting to discuss potential sanctions against Minsk over this incident. Some have called to investigate whether it would be possible to punish and limit Belarus potash exports to Europe. Others have suggested hitting and targeting oil and financial sectors, but it is unclear at this point sort of to what extent these sanctions could go, because Belarus is no stranger to sanctions. It is already under American and European sanctions over last year's handling of the protests following the disputed outcome of the presidential election last year and the crackdown on pro-democratic opposition demonstrations in Minsk.
Absolutely, Daria. And on this, you've touched on it. We've seen the strong backing for Lukashenko by Russian President Vladimir Putin. Take us through the significance of this relationship in terms of these sanctions where Russia has veto powers.
Well, Minsk and Moscow have indeed a very strong relationship, and both nations see each other as brother nations. And that we have seen and heard strong backing by Moscow to Minsk over this incident. And again, the Kremlin has stressed also that in response to attempts to link it to the incident in Belarus, the Kremlin spokesperson earlier, Dmitry Peskov, said that there is a sort of a wide anti-Russian sentiment in the West, and that it may have blinded some of Moscow's critics who tend to accuse it of everything and anything these days. And he also responded to some of the criticism towards Moscow and its position over this incident as unacceptable. As you know, the Russian and the Belarusian presidents are expected to meet here in Russia tomorrow, and it is widely expected that this incident will be discussed. However, there is no clarification and no confirmation of that at this point. We know that the sanctions that the EU could impose on Minsk have previously not been too harsh, despite the violent crackdown on the opposition and the outcry in Europe that it has caused. Possibly some commentators and observers have thought that these kind of sanctions and putting the Belarusian leader into a corner would not help the EU and would only push Minsk further closer to Moscow, which is a scenario that possibly some leaders in the West would not want to entertain. So there remains sort of an intrigue, and we'll see and hear from these statements. We'll look for first signs of statements from the Russian and Belarusian leaders who are meeting here in Russia tomorrow to see what sort of response there could be by Moscow and by Minsk in face of this incident and growing pressure from the West on Belarus.
Daria, thank you very much for bringing us all the latest details there. Daria Bandarchuk joining us live from Moscow.
WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.